you to the context of what are the kind of techniques that you could potentially use now for the planned business analysis approach. So you can use brainstorming. You've got at this stage, because it's in fairly early stages of the project conceptualization, you can use a business case to come up with the cost benefit analysis and things like that, identify the resources, get the buy-in from the stakeholders. And you can try and use brainstorming because you're not sure about how things can get done. You can go through the documents, existing documents, do a secondary research, and that's why it's called document analysis, going through the existing vision, roadmap, and trying to make some sense out of it. You can use some of the estimation techniques and the methodology like planning poker and things like that again here. But you can use relative estimation because you don't have a very clear idea what is going to come through later, right? You don't have that complete set. And then you can do some kind of financial analysis, ratio analysis here, for example, P analysis, all of those kind of things that you can potentially use here, cost benefit analysis again. And some of the things like, for example, you have the return on investment and return on equity. So those kind of things, because you're still in the early stages, you're trying to project what is going to come in the next 2 years, 3 years, or in the 5 months, or whatever it is. And then you create that kind of business case and plan. Functional decomposition is basically you're trying to decompose and break things further and further into smaller chunks of things. That's what analysis is all about. Business analysis, as I say, actually, as I was mentioning yesterday, dropping from the 30,000 feet overview to the ground and then deep dive, I was talking about that mile wide and the inch deep is basically that. It's basically you're looking at the big picture view, breaking things down. Analysis, the very word analysis means breaking things down. And that's what you do it in business analysis. You do the functional decomposition because you're not using technology, you're not using anything else. You're not trying to use that as a base. What are you using the base? Here you're using the functionality, the features, the logical stuff. You're not using any technology or anything, the modules and things like that. So that's why it is called functional decomposition, as opposed to architecture, where you use the decomposition with respect to the blocks, to the different layers, the front end, the back end, the middleware, the database, and things like that. But we as BAs, we don't do that. We try and look at that from the functionality aspect of view, right? And then that's why it's called functional decomposition. We would use interviews. I've discussed this yesterday about interviews and efficacy of that one-on-one discussion with the team. We use the item tracking in terms of where the item is. So item tracking in terms of the traceability of the requirement. So item here means requirement. So it could be a requirement, it could be a bug or a defect, it could be a task, a technical task, a subtask, it could be anything, a change request. All of that, you kind of track the item and where it is. Lessons learned, again, a kind of a tool and technique that we use for the coming in from the sprint retrospective, looking at the process, what went well, what didn't go well, what kind of lessons we can learn from them and implement. Process modeling, again, good for Kanban type of things where you have got process, you look at the, just like UML is the unified modeling language for products. For process, we use what we call as BPMN. That's the language and the notation we use. Business Process Modeling Notation, BPMN. So that's like a language with its own syntax, structures, notation, symbols, and things like that. And the different tools like Visio, for example, has got a BPMN kind of stencil or those kind of toolkit available, using which you can create the process models. Archimate is another one which has got the BPMN. So you can come up with a process model in terms of what is a process, what are the activities, what tasks, what subtasks, where are the breakdowns, what is the kind of handoffs involved, what are the reviewed, what is the workflow involved, what are the roles, what are the authors, all of those things are done with the process model. And then we do reviews. We have got reviews and looking at stuff, looking at the products, looking at the product review, customer reviews, and then your own peer reviews, and reviews at quality assurance and all those validations and verifications, all of those part of reviews. Risk analysis and management, very important, again, working more from the project point of view. What kind of risks are involved, technological risks and people risks and risks involving infrastructure, the physical risks, business risks, market risks, how are you going to address them, and then the mitigation of each of those. So again, that would be, and maintaining the risk register and things like that. All of that, again, are part of the risk analysis. Then scope modeling is basically the aspect of what is in scope vis-a-vis what is out of scope. So that boundaries, setting the boundaries for our application, and then understanding what is going to be part of this and what is not going to be part of this out of scope stuff. So we're going to do the context model, for example, context diagram, which actually is level 0 diagram as what we call typically. So that actually sets you what are the inputs, what is the black box process, and what are the outputs. So you're just doing it at that level. So that could be again a scope model. And then the surveys are questions. You can use some surveys to get kind of subjective feedback, but then they're not really that effective, because there are potential problems with surveys. I'll tell you each of these in the later discussions, but basically surveys are you send it's quantitative. You actually send out 10,000 questionnaires. You might get like 5 or 6 people responding back. And that too, you don't really get to understand the problem, because they'll perhaps say, or why the problem has come. You might actually understand what the problem is, but you might not understand from the survey why the problem has come through, why customers are facing an issue. You can't get to the depth and the problem with the survey. So they fail in that. They're not really great tools for that.
Of course it is not, because they're not open-ended.
True. Exactly. And if it's open-ended, then the people will not write them. They don't write. Even if you have got open-ended questions, people won't actually have the time to write all those and then give back to you. That's why it's very, very, very ineffective way to get feedback on why something is going wrong. So if you can still get to understand the problem, what it is, maybe that if you're lucky, but you don't really understand why it is happening, what was the root cause, how can you solve it, what could contribute to that, nothing. You can't get any of those. And the workshops are a brilliant way to, again, there's another way of elicitation. All of these are elicitation techniques. We'll talk about that in detail in the next section, elicitation. But workshops, just in a nutshell, workshops are very effective to put the middle management or even lower management people into a room, try and get them. And the most important takeaway for workshop is you can actually take a decision quicker. So things that might take like an email trail of 100 emails back and forth, and trying to get people to get on the phone and ask them, can we do it, decisions which could not have been taken, and kind of consensus has not been reached typically in a workshop. That would really help. Put 10 people into the room, and then you say, just lay out the plan and say, this is the problem, now you decide what needs to be done. So then they can't have an escape. They have got to take a decision. And that's the reason why the agenda is for the workshop to take a decision and arrive at a consensus. So workshops are very effective. In fact, I've done a lot of workshops, interviews. I have not done questionnaires. I did user testing. I did a lot of usability studies and user interviews, stakeholder interviews. Very, very effective, those one-on-one sessions as well. So